So this is my first case. So smaller. You guys can see it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's still loading. It's taking a second. So this guy had groin pain. And this was the finding here in the left scrotum. So it's fatty. It has these big chunky calcifications in it. So we weren't sure what this was. And actually they ended up getting an ultrasound somewhere else and it was separate from the testicle. So initially we were thinking, oh, like a fatty calcified mass in the scrotum, this could be a germ cell tumor. Mm-hmm. But it was an extratesticular tumor. So it was just a scrotal mass with fat. So UCSF crew, any ideas? This is the lesion and the mass, and we weren't really sure what it was, and it was resected. And any other guesses, Nellie? Anyone else?
No, that's all I have. I mean,
so, basically, this was a well-differentiated liposarcoma.
Oh my gosh!
So interesting one with like really big calcifications. Hey, Victor.
Did they take out the testicle, like a complete orchiectomy, or were they able to spare the testes?
No, so you have to do a radical orchiectomy, and basically you remove the entire testicle, scrotum, and like basically you want to get a completely clean surgical margin.
Oh, wow.
And I have a companion case for this. Victor, this was my first case, which was basically this scrotal mass with fat and calcifications. Initially thought could be a germ cell tumor, but it turned out to be a well-differentiated liposarcoma. And then this is the companion case. It's going to take a second to load. So you already know that it's in the spectrum of the same thing, but basically here you can see that there's what we initially thought was an inguinal hernia. You know, just a fat-containing inguinal hernia, but it looks a little bit unusual. You can see that there's some septations to it. And it's actually like hugging the lower pole of the kidney, and I'll show you the coronal. It was actually almost like pulling the kidney down a little bit. And so it's extending into the inguinal canal. And they resected this thinking that it was an inguinal hernia. And actually, a lot of times, this is one of my main teaching points, is that you can get these scrotal liposarcomas, especially rising from the spermatic cord or any of the fat along the way, and it can mimic an inguinal hernia. And if you don't bring up that possibility, they might not even send it for pathology. So in this case, they just said this was an inguinal hernia. They resected, like they repaired it, threw the fat away, did not even send it for pathology. In the end, it ended up recurring. So now we have proof that this was a liposarcoma. So I'll just show you the coronal on this.
I don't know that prospectively I would have raised liposarcoma.
Yeah, I mean, that's the point of bringing it up. But I do have a little summary slide, but you can see it looks on this coronal. Do you see how it's like,
yeah,
well, it's like affiliated with the kidney. It's actually coming from the retroperitoneal fat around the kidney and then growing down in this way. So it's not just like the peritoneal fat that's going into an inguinal hernia.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And it has it does have a little bit more streakiness and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But I would say just raise the possibility so that at least they send it for pathology, or they can even do a frozen section, and then they would know to do a radical resection because it's a completely different surgery than just an inguinal hernia repair. So I have a couple of just teaching points. So these were a couple of cases of how do I move this across? Spermatic cord liposarcomas. They tend to be well differentiated, but they're often mistaken for an inguinal hernia or a lipoma. So extratesticular masses are most likely benign, and the most common one of those is a lipoma. But if you do have a malignant extratesticular mass, sarcomas are possible, and liposarcoma is actually the most common. So some clues are that you might have smudgy fat, you might have septations, and then calcifications is a really big clue because you can get that in any liposarcoma. these tend to be painless, slow-growing masses, so will mimic inguinal hernias there. And even if you do a radical orchiectomy, which is what the treatment is, 20% will have a positive margin. So you have to do high ligation of the spermatic cord, and even then, when you do a radical orchiectomy, 20% will recur. So just like retroperitoneal sarcomas, they have a high rate of local recurrence. Any questions?